Hello, this is Danny from CG Dreams. Today we're going to be looking at how to use the character definition tool. The character definition tool is used to transfer the animation of one character onto another. What makes this particular tool so useful is that it can be used for other things. In addition to this, it's unlike the conventional retargeting where it can cause problems. With this method, it caters for a lot of those problems such as scale and joint orientation. I'm going to show you a simplified version to start with, how to use this tool, and then we're going to actually apply a full character rig from one character rig to another. To create a simplified version of this, I'm simply just going to go to the character tab and select the joint tool and make a 3 or 4 joint rig. I'm going to do this from the right hand side. And we just do one more. It's always a good idea to name your joints. This is also part of how you would use the character definition tool because it relies on a certain name convention in its hierarchy. With this done, I'm going to create a duplicate of this character rig, albeit a simple one. I'm going to call this Source Target, just so that we've got something to look at when we're trying to work out which one we've got selected. The target rig I'm going to move just to the side here so that we can actually see how this works. Now, why they are identical, I'm going to change some things in here. I'm going to call this something completely different. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to apply some animation to the source. Next, I'm going to select the root null or the root joint in whichever one is in the first in the hierarchy. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to the rigging and select character definition. With the character definition tag selected, I'm going to click on Open Manager. By default, it's set up with a preset for a biped character, but you can add your own body parts in here, and this is done by the Add Body Part button. You can also load and save your own presets for future use. The way this works is that we add body parts, and that's going to define the naming convention, and then what we do is we create a joint reference to those body parts, and that joint can actually be a completely different name. But if it happens to be the right and the same name as the definition already created down this list, then we can automatically set it to automatically find the skeleton and extract it using this Extract Skeleton button. In my particular case, I've made it so everything is custom, so I can show you from this point of view. I'm going to shift click everything in here and click on Remove Body Part. And we're going to add some joint definitions, or shall I say some name definitions in here. So we can add body part. I'm going to call this hips. Add another body part, spine 1. Now you notice that I'm intentionally making sure that I'm actually not matching the name of the joints that we've already got here. This is so I can show you how we can do things in a custom rig. Afterwards I'm going to show you where things are automatically set up for us, and it's a much more easier process. But this is a manual way. So I'm going to go through here now and select and add a different body part that represents or will represent all of the joints. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can create groups as well. This is for the case, for instance, if you've got a group of joints for the left leg, a group of joints, a hierarchy for the right leg, and so on. So this is how we would work with this. In this particular case, it's very simple, but if you did want to create a group, you can simply just drag one into the other, and you can see here now we've got an expandable group. This would represent things also like the hands, with the fingers that are inside the hands by default as its hierarchy, the same as it would be for the actual joints in your character. As you can see at the moment, we have no joints, no joint references as to another joint that is going to be applied to, no controllers, as you can see here. Let's expand that a bit, and controller references. Now what we can do with this is we can, on a more sophisticated setup, apply a character that is controlled purely by controllers, and I'll still apply that to a character that has no controllers. So for the hips, I'm going to drag the hip bone into the string, and it will automatically create a searchable string for it to look for. When we click on the extract skeleton, it will look and find, in this particular case it's found hip. We're going to go to spine 1, and in here we're going to just manually type it in. So we can put in there spine, comma, a space, spines, comma, what else? Maybe, oh, and spine with a dash. What we've done here is we've created 3 lots of strings for it to search for. So when we click on the extract skeleton, you can see here that it's actually found all of them. The only one we need in here is spine 1, so we can actually remove the rest of these. They're not going to be needed. I'm going to copy this string and put it into here for the next spine. You can now see that it says it's actually got a joint reference now. It's referenced to a joint which is to the hierarchy of the expected name in here that sets the definition. What we don't have in here is any controllers, and this is because we've added no controllers to the rig. But if we did add a controller to the rig, we would drag and drop this into here, the controller. Now we've done this, we can save the preset. Now we're going to go over to the target, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to right click, go to the rigging tag and select character definition. You can also just copy the tag from the previous one onto there and start working from that point. We're going to open the manager and we're going to do exactly the same thing. Apart from, we're going to start with the preset, which is more suited to the rigs that we're actually going to transfer the data from and to. We go to load preset, and the one I done was demo version 4, and now we've got that preset set up. We do exactly the same thing as before, only this time we're dragging these joints into the corresponding definitions that are set there. Now that we have both of them set up with character definition tags, we're going to move on to the next stage. Now before we move on, there's something to mention, that I've just changed the colours of the rigs just so they become more visibly obvious which one's the source and which one's the target. The source is in red, target is in green. If I just scrub through the animation, you can see here that the source has its animation on it and the target is not moving, obviously, even though the character definition tags are on both. And this is because the character definition tags are working independently of each other. They're not actually linked in any way, and this is where the solver comes into the process. But before we go into the solver, it's just good to mention that when you bring in characters in Cinema 4D that have animation, there's a likelihood that the first frame of the animation is not going to be a symmetrical A pose or a T pose. And it's best that when the solver for the character definition is working, it can actually see some kind of similar pose for both characters. And this is why we've got this set reference pose and go to reference pose. This enables us to set a reference pose for a character so that it can be of similar type of pose between the characters for the solver to work correctly. In the case of a character that gets brought in that has animation, you would simply go to this button which says go to reference pose. And all this will do is it will put it back to its A pose or T pose before it was animated. In the case of the set reference pose, this would be used for if you have no reference pose that is made, where you could then go ahead and start to create a reference pose for your character and set that so that you could put the character in a pose similar to the pose of the source. And that's what these two buttons are for. But as both of these rigs, as simple as they are, and also identical in their pose, we don't need to do the set reference pose or go to reference pose. All we need to do here is we need to make sure that we selected the target, the solver, and then click on create solver. Once we create the solver, you'll notice that the target is automatically in there already. And then what we can do is we can use this picker here to then select the character definition of the source. Now that we've done this, it's all done. Now what should happen is when we scrub through the animation, both of these now are replicated in their animation. And as you can see, that is the case. Now the other thing to bear in mind is that this is done by the account of reference between one rig to another rig using the character definition and this character solver. So this doesn't mean that the target has the same keyframes as the source. If you wanted to make sure that you can get the keyframes or get the animation permanently within the rig onto there, so it's working independently of the character definition, then there's another stage that you have to go through, and we'll look at this next. In this final part of this tutorial for the simple rig, we're now going to look at how we can make the target animation work on the rig without no dependence on the character definition tags in place. And to do this, we use a feature found in the animation tab, and it's called motion clips. So for this, we select the first base of the hierarchy, which is in this particular case is called target. We go to the animate and we click on add motion clip. Inside here we need to give it a name, and we need to make sure that bake expressions is turned on. This is because this is not keyframe based, this is expression based. That's done by the solver. Then we click OK, and now we've got the motion clip tag on there. We can then go ahead and disassociate the solver by disabling this, and then what you'll find will happen is that it will still do its animation. And there you have it. Of course, you can completely delete these if you wanted to, and it's not going to make any difference because now the animation is captured in the motion clip.